The girls climbed the steps to the second floor just as Toby came running down them. He nearly knocked them over. "Out of the way, Lightning Bolt Head!" he shouted, then laughed his annoying little laugh. He ran past and disappeared down the hall. "That kid is so un-punk rock," Sabrina thought. The sisters reached Sabrina's locker and she went to work on the combination. If there had been anything good about the day, it was that at least she had been assigned a locker near her homeroom. She wouldn't have to trudge through the halls in the morning with all her books. "What kind of class are you in?" Daphne asked as she peered through the window into Gretna's room. "What are you talking about?" Sabrina said as she put on her coat and closed her locker. "Look!" her sister said, pointing into Sabrina's homeroom. Sabrina gazed through the window. The room looked as if a tornado had gone through it. Desks and chairs had been tossed around and there was an odd white substance covering everything. She opened the door and the girls stepped inside. The white substance hung from the ceiling in strands like silky ribbons. It fluttered in the icy wind that blew in from a broken window. In the center of the room, a large sack of the junk was suspended from the ceiling, slowly swaying in the breeze. "Don't touch anything," Sabrina said, tugging at a strand that had attached itself to her coat. "What's that thing hanging from the ceiling?" Daphne asked, as her sister crossed the room to look. Sabrina grabbed a nearby chair, pulled it close to the sack, and climbed onto the seat. "Something's inside it," she said, as she yanked at the layers of sticky stuff that formed the sack. Soon, something began to reveal itself from deep inside. Something with a face. "It's Mr. Grumpner," she whispered. The old man was as purple as an eggplant, and his once puffy face was gaunt and drained. "He's dead." "Oh man, that's so gross!" Daphne cried unhappily. "What could have done this?" Sabrina wondered. "Probably whoever left that," the little girl said, pointing at the far end of the classroom. Sabrina turned to see what her sister was referring to. On the chalkboard was another horrible but familiar sight. Someone had dipped his or her hand into a can of paint and pressed it on the wall. The handprint was bright red. Chapter 4. The school doors flew open and a dark-haired man in a purple suit strutted in with his head in the air. He swaggered down the shiny hallway with a dwarf and an obese police officer bringing up the rear. When Sabrina spotted the group, she groaned. Mayor Charming was not one of her favorite people. To anyone else, Mayor Charming might have seemed like a run-of-the-mill politician, but Sabrina knew better. Mayor Charming was really Prince Charming, the dashing romantic hero of a dozen fairy tales. But, as Sabrina knew firsthand, Charming was only his name. The mayor could be an obnoxious, rude know-it-all, and he had a particular disdain for Sabrina's family. In a nutshell, he hated the Grimms. Racing to keep up was Mr. Seven, the mayor's diminutive sidekick. Seven was actually one of the original 7 dwarfs and acted as Charming's driver, assistant, and whipping boy. Behind him was Sheriff Hampstead, who did his best to keep up with the others while trying to hoist his pants up at the same time. "So, let's go through this one more time," the mayor said to his followers with an air of contention. "Who's doing all the talking?" "You are," Hampstead and Mr. Seven said in unison. "And why is that?" "Because we are numbskulls. See how easy that was?" "But what if I see something suspicious? I am the sheriff, after all," Hampstead argued. Charming came to a halt and spun around on his heels. "Are you going to make me get out the idiot hat? 'Cause it sounds like someone wants to wear the idiot hat." "I don't," Mr. Seven said. The sheriff frowned and shook his head. "Good," Mayor Charming snapped. He took a deep breath and looked up to the ceiling as if someone were watching from above. "Okay, let's relax. Let out all the anger and frustration. You are a great mayor. Smile." Suddenly, A smile sprang to Charming's face, and he started down the hallway again. The mayor was a master at the phony 2 feet grin, but slid off his face when he spotted Sabrina and Daphne. "What are they doing here?" he moaned. "They found the body," the sheriff explained. "The sister's groom found the body, and no one told me," Charming said. "You told us not to talk," Mr. Seven said defensively. The mayor bit down on his lower lip and mumbled a variety of curse words Sabrina had never heard before. He reached into his pocket, took out a folded piece of paper, and handed it to Mr. Seven, who looked down at it and frowned. The dwarf unfolded it, revealing a pointy paper hand, and put it on his head. Someone had written "idiot" in big black letters on the front of it. Mr. Seven lowered his eyes in humiliation. "Howdy, Mayor," Daphne said happily. Even though Charming considered the Grimms his eternal enemies, Daphne had a soft spot for him. The mayor had helped the family stop Jack the Giant Killer, but most important, he had been kind to Elvis when the big dog was injured. Since then, the little girl had been convinced that deep down, Mayor Charming was one of the good guys. "Sheriff, let's make a new law. Children who cannot stay out of the way go to jail," he said through gritted teeth. "You're so funny," Daphne said, smiling into the mayor's face. The little girl grabbed Charming's necktie, yanked him down to her level, and gave him a smooch on the nose. The anger melted from the man's face only to be replaced by confusion. He pulled away from the girl as if he had accidentally touched a hot stove. Principal Hamelin rushed down to the hall to join them. "Mayor Charming, Sheriff Hampstead, this is such a terrible tragedy. I just want you to know that the faculty will cooperate in every way we can. I just feel horrible about this." Charming smiled and shook the principal's hand vigorously. "I appreciate that, Piper. We'll get to the bottom of this and be out of your hair as soon as possible," he said. "I assume you don't have any more of these running around this building." He waved his hand at the guards as if he would try to shoo away a couple of annoying houseflies. "You and children," the principal said. "Oh no." It happened at the end of the day, and most of them were already on their way home. "Sheriff, let's take a look," Charming said, gesturing to the door of Mr. Grosvenor's classroom. The two men tried to enter the room at the same time and got jammed in the doorway together. They squirmed and shoved, but were trapped until Mr. Seven came up from behind and pushed them into the room. "I thought we weren't going to do that anymore," Mr. Charming said, maintaining his phony smile in front of everyone. Hampstead muttered an apology and merely took a camera from his pocket. He snapped pictures of the unusual crime scene and Mr. Grosvenor's disturbing corpse. "He was found about 10 minutes after the last bell," Principal Hamelin offered. "I see," said Charming, as he yanked some of the sticky stuff off a desk. Sheriff Hampstead stepped close to the body to take more photos. He pulled aside a strand of the sticky substance to get a better look at Mr. Grosvenor's face. "Looks like the blood has been drained right out of him." "Maybe it was a vampire," Daphne cried. "There's no such thing as vampires," Charming muttered. "I used to think there was no such thing as you," Sabrina thought. "Sheriff, do you have any idea what happened to him?" the principal asked. "Well," Hampstead said as he put his camera away, "if I had to hazard a guess, I'd say—" "Spiders," Charming interrupted. "A whole bunch of spiders murdered him. There are so many cobwebs here, I'd say it took hundreds of spiders to make them. Looks like they came in through the window." "It's too cold for spiders," the sheriff argued, but when the mayor flashed him an angry look, the policeman zipped his lips. "And what would the spider's motivation be?" Sabrina asked. "How should I know?" Charlie said. "Maybe Mr. Grosvenor stepped on one and its family wanted revenge." "Spider revenge?" Sabrina asked. I don't hear anyone else with a better theory, Charlie snapped. Suddenly the door opened and Granny Rhoda and Mr. Kenneth entered the room. "Oh, I have a theory," Granny Rhoda said, scanning the room. It was a monster. Daphne ran to the old woman and wrapped her arms around her. "We found something gross!" the little girl cried, burying her face into the old woman's bright green dress. Granny bent down and kissed her on the forehead. "A monster," Chummy growled. "We've had some insane theories in the past, Rhoda, but monsters—" "You're right, ma'am," the old woman said sarcastically. "Fairyport Landing has fairies, witches, and robots, and men made out of straw, but monsters? Now I've really lost my marbles." Charlie scowled. "Well, have you look around. I know I can't stop you." "Thank you, Maya," Granny Rhoda said. She crossed the room to Sabrina and took her by the hand. "Are you okay, Liebling?" Sabrina nodded. Granny patted her on the head and walked over to the broken window. Among the glass was something long and black. The old woman gingerly moved the glass aside with her fingers and plucked the object off the ground. It was a feather. "Gentlemen, I believe I have found a clue," she said. Sheriff Hampstead took the feather and eyed it closely. "It looks like crow to me," he said. "There's a couple more there under the windowsill." Mr. Kenneth took a deep sniff of the air. "It is crow." "They probably blew in with the wind," Chummy said, snatching the feather from the sheriff's pudgy hands. He tossed it to the floor as if it were meaningless. "We found a clue too," Daphne said proudly. She pointed at the red hand painted on the chalkboard. Hampstead, Chummy, Mr. Seven, and Principal Hammond peered at the red hand closely. Each of them had a worried look on his face. "It's just like the one the police found in my parents' abandoned car," Sabrina said. "Or maybe that blew in with the wind too." Charming scowled and rolled his eyes at her. "Probably just a prank." "A prank?" Sabrina and Daphne cried. "Mayor Charming, that's the sign of the Scarlet Hand," said Granny Rhoda. "There's no such thing as the Scarlet Hand," he said. "Hampstead has done a thorough investigation, and we've concluded that Jack invented the whole thing." Sabrina couldn't believe her ears. Charming knew the Scarlet Hand was real. He had admitted to the girls that the shadowy criminal group of ever-afters had approached him, and this was before they had heard Jack brag about being a member. Why was he now lying about its existence? Before Sabrina could confront him, the door opened and Snow White entered. It didn't seem possible, but Miss White was even more beautiful up close. Mayor Charming rushed to block her view of Mr. Grumpler's corpse, but the teacher had already spotted it. "So it's true," she gasped. "Snow, you shouldn't see this," Charming said softly. "I'm fine," Snow White said, but the mayor ignored her. He took her by the hand and led her into the hallway. Sabrina and Daphne shared a glance and pushed through the crowd, eager not to miss a second of this royal soap opera. The mayor pulled the teacher into his arms as if she needed comfort, and for a brief moment she seemed to enjoy it, but then she pulled away. "Really," Miss White said, "what did that to him?" "Try to put it out of your head, Snow," Charming said. He put his hand on her shoulder and looked deep into her eyes. It was hard to believe that the usually obnoxious mayor could be so tender. "I've got my best men on it." The others filed out of Gunner's classroom, and Sheriff Hampstead took a row of yellow police. Well, that seems to be the end.